Hello, everyone, and welcome to a reflection on words, how to be a better speaker. So what is this words thing all about? Well, your words have power is what I talk about all the time. But we're going to have a bit of fun. I'd like you to close your eyes for a second or two. Trust me, I'm not going to do anything stupid. As you're closing your eyes, what does the word mean to you? If I just said word, what's the first thing that comes into your mind? Is it a picture? Is it a sound? Is it a feeling? I'm curious. Do let me know. Because let's go back into evolution. Sound is the first thing we learn. It's our earliest sense that gets switched on. Even in utero, there have been anecdotal things of, I grew up in the UK, and there was a particular soap opera that some mothers I know used to sit down and watch in the evening. And the theme tune was recognized by the baby because this was done every day. So when the baby was born and was getting quite fractious and they heard this theme tune come on, they calmed down. And it was only when mum put two and two together and thought, they were listening while I was watching it when I was pregnant. How interesting is that? So that there's been some empirical research done on that now as well, not just in terms of the sound of things, but also voices. So yes, if you are pregnant, you know of pregnant people, get them to talk to their baby specifically so they get to hear voices and also the tone of voice, because it's not simply excuse me, it's not simply the actual word with the semantics behind it. We'll come on to that in a minute. It's also the quality, the timbre of the voice, whether there's high energy, whether there's calming energy, whether it's angry, sad. You know, all those non-verbals. You can hear in somebody's voice how they're feeling. Right, now I need a cough, excuse me. There we go. Okay, so there's the sound element to it. Those waves of sound in the air. That's frequency. That carries literally a frequency that you can pick up on an oscilloscope. So I want you to hold that in abeyance for one moment. And let's think about the concept of a word. Because as we grow, as we learn and develop, we're hearing that constant stream of sound. But it's a constant stream of sound. Where does the concept of a word come in? Well, it's when, as parents, we hear the stream of babble that the children practice, the little practice, and we pick up mama, because that's important. And to start with the babbling sounds, forgive me, this is the speech pathologist coming out of me. The babbling sounds will come right at the front, because those lips are so important. That's where they get sustenance. Major feels around the lips. So when you hear mum, 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 you go and go, mama, yes, mummy. And you put a little boundary around that sound bite, if you will. And then, okay, so that's something significant. And ultimately, we learn the concept of a unit of sound equals some meaning. Later on, when we're looking at books, we can see the written version of that stream of sound. And dear English, as those of us who have grown up in it often don't appreciate, the difference between how things are written and how things sound. Hats off to anybody who's learned English as a second language. My point is that once we see it written down, we then have more of a concept of those boundaries, and we can start to form words ourselves in terms of writing. But that concept of a word, that concept of a unit of meaning, that is very early in terms of development, because we then put it in context. We'll hear a stream of sound, we'll appreciate that that's a word, but we don't know actually what it means until we've seen it in different contexts, we've heard it in different contexts, we've maybe used it in different contexts. I'm not going to share that story without permission, family one. My point is, though, that there was a family situation where a little person in the family said something really quite interesting. Now, I'll share this one. Little 2.5-year-old was told to stay away from the kitchen because her grandfather was busy cooking. And she wasn't going to take that because she wanted to see what was going on, curious little thing that she was. So she went down to find him, and he said, no, out of the kitchen, please, I'm busy. So she comes toddling back to where everybody else is sitting and says, Dumpty, her name for grandpa. Dos. He was cross. Because she knew that that word, that sound bite, meant in her immature way in terms of the actual pronunciation. My point is that she had heard that word. She was trying it out. Did it make sense? Did she get positive feedback for using the right word in the right context? And that's how we learn. We've heard it. We're then sort of going, okay, I think this means in this context, this is appropriate. We try it out, we get feedback. We lodge it in the old memory banks. Great. So then when we hear that same word again, maybe in a different situation, and bear in mind, we're talking about very little people, different people involved, different scenario, does that word still mean the same thing? Because that's what we've got filed in the memory banks. Fast forward a few years, and you're now in a situation where you have your own visual picture in your head of the concept of cross, for instance. Let's go with that one still. Cross as in angry. But somebody uses the word cross in a different way. Crossroads. Hang on. Roads being cross, roads being angry? That doesn't make sense. So then the internal word is challenged because it's a different concept. Now, why am I banging on about this? Because you as a speaker are very often introducing new concepts to people using familiar words. Because the thing is, you've got to start where they're at and then take them on the journey. That's very often where story comes in, because you can weave a story around a concept that you're introducing with familiar language. So once upon a time, and think about all the fairy stories that you heard growing up, they were all moral tales. They all had an underlying lesson. But if you sit down and tell a 4-year-old, you don't do this, you don't do that, it's not going to go in. But if you weave a good story around it and you show characters that did or didn't do the moral of the tale, suddenly it makes sense. So my invitation to you this week is, what is the language that the words that you could weave your message with. This will depend on who your audience is, what is familiar to them. Start with where they're at, develop a lovely story, and it may be absolutely nothing to do with the surface message that you're telling. But the deeper meaning will go throughout. And at the end, you have them pretty much where you want them when you tell a really good tale. So my invitation to you this week is, one, know your audience. What is going to spark with them? If they're financiers, talk money, talk investment. If they're farmers, give agricultural examples. If they're mums, share with them little fun things like I did earlier on. Now, I'm not saying you're all mums, but most of us have had the experience of having a little person around and learning language, which is why I used that example. What is it that they will understand? Almost like the vehicle, the car you're going to drive the story with, the point to get to where you want to show people a different view than the one they're already in. Use your words to do that. Your words have power. Bring those sound segments into a visual picture. And as you feel the vibration, you will rise, excuse me, that back to that frequency point again. You can bring the concepts to a higher frequency than the confusion that they're feeling at the moment. I would love to know your thoughts on what I've shared with you today. So do share with me. How do you think about words? Do you think of them as a sound, a picture, frequency? There's no right or wrong here. I'm curious. Have fun with this week. Do let me know how you go. Bye from me.